It was a quiet Sunday afternoon in Vermont when Emily Parker carried a basket of folded laundry up the stairs. The house was calm, filled with the faint hum of the washing machine and the ticking of the wall clock. Her husband, David, was out running errands, and his 18-year-old son, Ryan, was upstairs, as usual, keeping to himself. Emily had been married to David for 3 years, and in that time she had learned that Ryan was polite but distant. He didn't dislike her. He just kept a wall up, a quiet wall built out of grief and confusion that came from losing his mother too young. Emily paused outside Ryan's door. She heard faint music and thought she'd ask if he wanted something for lunch. The door was half open, so she called softly, "Ryan." No answer. She pushed the door a little, just enough to peek in. What she saw made her heart stop. Ryan sat at his desk, startled, his face red with embarrassment. He moved quickly, trying to hide what he was doing. Emily gasped, realizing she had walked in on a private moment. She turned away at once, blurting out, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and closed the door quickly. Her heart raced. She rushed back downstairs, the laundry basket still in her arms, her cheeks burning with shock and guilt. She sat on the couch, unable to breathe for a second. She hadn't meant to invade his privacy. It had just happened so fast. She felt terrible, partly because of the awkwardness, but mostly because she had seen the look in his eyes: fear, shame, loneliness. It wasn't just an embarrassing moment. It was a window into how alone he really was. That image stayed with her for hours. She tried reading, cleaning, watching TV, anything to push it out of her mind, but it wouldn't go. She had seen not a rebellious teenager, but a young man struggling quietly with growing up. Emotions and the emptiness of a house that had never quite felt like home. When David returned later that evening, Emily acted normal. They had dinner, talked about bills, plans, and work. Ryan didn't come down. Emily mentioned he might not be feeling well. David shrugged and said he'll come around. That was his answer to everything about Ryan: simple, detached. Emily nodded but didn't say more. She wanted to, but something told her to wait. That night, as she lay in bed, she stared at the ceiling. The silence in the house felt heavier than usual. She could hear faint music from upstairs again. She imagined Ryan sitting alone, headphones on, trying to disappear into his world. He barely spoke to his father anymore. Most days they exchanged a few short words at dinner and went back to their routines. Emily thought about how hard it must be to live in a house full of memories that didn't include her. She turned to look at David, already asleep beside her, and whispered to herself, "He's just a boy who needs someone to talk to." But she also knew that anything she said might embarrass him further. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that if she didn't try, things would only get worse. The next morning came bright and clear. Emily tried to act like everything was normal. She made breakfast, the smell of pancakes and coffee filling the kitchen. She left a plate for Ryan on the counter and went about her chores. Around noon, she heard him come down, grab something to eat quietly, and go back upstairs without a word. It broke her heart a little. Emily decided she wouldn't bring up what happened. Not yet. But she would find a way to talk to him gently at the right time. He was young, still figuring out who he was, and clearly didn't have anyone guiding him through it. She remembered her own teenage years, how confusing and lonely they had been after losing her father. She had made mistakes, felt misunderstood, and wished someone had cared enough to listen. That afternoon, Emily went into the garden to water her plants. She looked up at Ryan's window once, noticing the curtains drawn tight. She sighed. Part of her wanted to ignore the situation completely, pretend it never happened, but another part, stronger, more maternal, knew she couldn't. Something about his eyes when she accidentally walked in stayed with her. It wasn't anger she saw, but sadness. By evening, she found herself standing at the base of the stairs again. She almost called his name, but stopped. "Not today," she whispered. "Give him time." She sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, lost in thought. The TV played softly in the background, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought about how David, though kind, often avoided emotional conversations. He worked long hours, came home tired, and rarely noticed the quiet tension in their home. Emily had tried to reach Ryan many times before, offering to help with school. asking about his hobbies, but every time, he'd smile politely and retreat back to his room. That small mistake, the door opening at the wrong time, had exposed something she hadn't been able to see before. Not just teenage awkwardness, but isolation. A boy trapped between childhood and adulthood. Between his late mother's memory and a stepmother he didn't know how to accept. As the night grew colder, she brewed a cup of tea and sat by the window, staring out at the dark street. Maybe this is the moment things change, she thought. Maybe this is how understanding begins. Her mind replayed the look on his face, surprised, frightened, ashamed, and then her own reaction. Rushing out like she had done something wrong. Maybe she had handled it too fast, too awkwardly. She wished she had just said, "It's okay, Ryan, don't worry." But instead, she had fled. Emily decided that tomorrow she would talk to him calmly. Not about what she saw, but about how he was feeling. She would find a way to let him know she cared, that he didn't have to feel alone. That night, she went to bed late. The clock ticked past midnight as the house went silent again. Lying there, Emily realized that sometimes the most uncomfortable moments become the turning points in our lives. She didn't know it yet, but what had happened that afternoon would be the start of something bigger, a fragile bond that would soon test her marriage, her patience, and her heart. For now, all she could do was hope. Hope that tomorrow Ryan would look at her, not with embarrassment, but with trust. Hope that somehow, through the awkwardness and silence, they could start becoming a real family. And as she finally drifted off to sleep, one thought stayed in her mind: helping someone doesn't always start with a plan. Sometimes it starts with a mistake you can't stop thinking about. The next morning, the house felt unusually quiet. Emily had barely slept, still thinking about the awkward moment that had happened 2 days ago. She knew she had to talk to Ryan. The silence between them felt heavier with each passing hour. She didn't want the poor boy to think she was judging him. More than anything, she wanted him to know she cared. She got up early and made breakfast: pancakes, scrambled eggs, and tea. It wasn't much, but it was her small way of breaking the ice. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and comforting. When she heard Ryan's footsteps coming down the stairs, her heart started to beat faster. She smiled softly as he entered the room. "Morning," she said gently. "Morning," he muttered, eyes low. He looked uncomfortable, unsure of where to stand or what to say. Emily could sense his embarrassment still lingered. She decided to face it kindly. "Ryan," she said, keeping her voice calm. "About the other day," he froze, his eyes widening. "Please, Emily, can we just forget it happened?" She nodded slowly. "We can, if that's what you want. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. You seemed upset." For a moment, he said nothing. Then he sighed, sitting at the table. "It's not you. I don't know. I feel weird all the time. Like I don't fit anywhere." Emily sat across from him, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. "You mean at home?" He nodded. "Yeah, Dad's always busy. When he's here, it's like I can't talk to him. He doesn't get it. And you're nice, but it's hard. I don't know how to act around you." Her heart softened. She could hear the loneliness in his voice. "Ryan, I get it. I really do. I know I'm not your mom, and I'm not trying to take her place. But I want you to know I'm here for you, no matter what." He looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time in days. "You don't have to do that." "Maybe not," she said gently, "but I want to." He blinked, unsure how to respond. For the first time, his expression softened. The silence between them wasn't heavy. Anymore, it felt calm, like the air had finally cleared a little. Emily felt a quiet relief wash over her. Then Ryan spoke again, his voice lower. "You know, people always tell me to move on from my mom, but I can't. Every time Dad smiles now, it's like he's forgetting her." Emily's throat tightened. "That's not true. Your dad misses her too, but he's trying to live again. That doesn't mean he stopped loving her. It just means he's trying to keep going." Ryan shook his head. "Maybe, but it feels like she's being replaced. And I guess I take it out on you sometimes." Emily smiled sadly. "You have every right to feel what you feel, Ryan. Losing someone you love changes everything. It makes you afraid to let people in again. I know because I went through that once too. He looked at her, surprised. You did. She nodded. Yes, when I lost my father, I shut everyone out. I didn't want anyone's help. I thought staying alone was safer, but it just made the pain worse. She paused, her eyes soft. You remind me a little of myself back then? Something shifted in Ryan's expression. It wasn't a full smile, but there was understanding there. You really don't hate me, do you? Emily chuckled quietly. Of course not. I care about you. You're part of my family, Ryan. There was a small silence. Then Ryan said quietly, I've never really heard anyone say that. That sentence hit her deeply. She wanted to reach out to comfort him somehow, but she didn't move. She didn't want to make things awkward again. Instead, she said softly, you don't have to earn it. Ryan, you just have to believe it. For the first time since she married David, Emily felt like she had finally broken through the wall that stood between her and Ryan. It wasn't gone completely, but there was a door now open, fragile and real. Ryan stood up, looking unsure what to do next. Thanks, he said quietly, for talking to me. She smiled warmly. Anytime. Just then, the front door opened. David stepped inside, holding his briefcase, looking surprised to see them both at the table. Oh, he said, raising an eyebrow. What's all this? Emily stood up quickly. Just breakfast, she said. Ryan and I were talking. David's eyes shifted between them. His tone was light, but there was something uncertain in his look. Everything okay? Yes, Emily said quickly. Everything's fine. Ryan gave a small nod and left the room. David watched him go, then turned to Emily. He talked to you. She smiled faintly. A little. I think he just needed someone to listen. David sighed. That's good. Maybe you're the only one who can reach him. Emily felt a flicker of pride at that, but also a pang of worry. She didn't want David to misunderstand what was happening. She was simply trying to help, to heal a wound that had been ignored too long. The rest of the day passed quietly. Ryan stayed in his room, but seemed lighter somehow. Emily noticed the small changes. His door was slightly open instead of locked. And when she called him for dinner, he answered with a quiet coming. At the table that evening, they talked briefly about school, movies, and nothing too deep. But to Emily, that small talk meant everything. It was a sign that he was opening up. Later that night, when she was cleaning up the dishes, David came up behind her. You've got a gift, you know, he said. He actually smiled today. Emily smiled faintly, but didn't answer. Part of her wanted to tell him the truth, that what Ryan needed most wasn't advice or rules, but someone who saw him for who he really was. But she stayed quiet. After David went upstairs, Emily sat alone in the kitchen, thinking about Ryan's words. She could still hear his voice saying, I don't know where I belong. It echoed in her mind, and she knew this was only the beginning. She didn't know what would come next, but she had made up her mind. She would be there for him no matter how uncomfortable it got, no matter how complicated it became. Because that's what love looked like sometimes. Not romantic love, but the kind that chooses to stay, listen, and care. As she turned off the lights and climbed the stairs, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. For the first time, she believed their home could become a place of healing. She didn't know that her decision to care, to reach out, would soon test every bond in that house. But in that moment, as she whispered goodnight to the silent hallway, she knew she had done the right thing. And deep down, she sensed that one honest conversation could change everything. The days after that quiet breakfast brought a strange calm to the Parker home. For the first time in months, Ryan came out of his room more often. He'd sit at the table while Emily cooked, ask about her work, and even laugh at her small jokes. Emily felt relieved. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. She could see the difference in his eyes, less distance, more light. But David noticed too. He wasn't unkind, just watchful. He'd come home from work and see them talking in the kitchen or laughing over dinner and grow silent. At first, Emily didn't think much of it. She assumed he was simply happy to see them getting along. But as days turned into weeks, his silence began to feel heavier, sharper. One evening, while Emily was preparing dinner, David walked in and asked casually, "You've been spending a lot of time with Ryan lately, haven't you?" His voice sounded calm, but there was something behind it, a tone she hadn't heard before. She smiled lightly, trying to keep things simple. "Yes, he's opening up a little. I think he just needed someone to listen." David nodded but didn't respond. He sat at the table, flipping through his phone. The air felt different, thick with unspoken thoughts. When Ryan entered the kitchen and greeted Emily warmly, David's eyes followed every move. Emily could feel the tension but ignored it, hoping it would pass. Over the next few days, David's distance grew. He wasn't angry, just cold. He'd stay late at work, eat dinner quietly, and barely talk to either of them. Emily tried to reassure herself it was just stress. But deep down, she knew something had shifted. Meanwhile, Ryan seemed happier. He started helping Emily with chores, carrying groceries, fixing things around the house, even tending to her garden. He talked about his future, his art, and the colleges he dreamed of applying to. Emily was proud. She saw potential in him, a boy turning into a man, finally believing in himself. One afternoon, they were in the backyard cleaning the patio when Ryan showed her a sketchbook filled with pencil drawings. "These are amazing," she said sincerely. The corners of his mouth lifted. "You really think so?" "I do. You've got real talent. You should show these to your dad." Ryan hesitated. He doesn't really get it. He thinks art's a waste of time. Emily frowned slightly. Maybe he just doesn't understand it yet. Parents worry. It doesn't mean he doesn't care. Ryan looked away, then said quietly, "Sometimes I wish he cared like you do." The words caught her off guard. She didn't know what to say, but the sincerity in his voice was real. Before she could respond, they heard a car door slam. David had come home early. He stepped outside, his face unreadable as he looked at the two of them standing close together over the sketchbook. "What's going on out here?" he asked. Ryan smiled awkwardly. "Just showing Emily some of my drawings." David gave a stiff nod and walked back inside. The warmth of the moment vanished. Ryan looked uneasy, and Emily could feel her pulse quicken. That night, dinner was silent. David barely looked at her. When she asked about his day, he answered in one-word sentences. When Ryan tried to speak, he cut him off. The tension was unbearable. After Ryan went upstairs, Emily finally asked, "What's wrong with you lately?" David leaned back in his chair. "Nothing. Just watching the way things are around here." "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked softly, though her voice trembled. He looked at her, eyes sharp with a mix of hurt and suspicion. "It means my wife spends more time talking to my son than she does to me." Emily's heart sank. "David, that's not fair. I'm just trying to help him." "You said yourself he needed someone." "Said help him, not replace me," he replied, standing up. "He's my son, Emily." Tears filled her eyes, but she held her ground. "And I know that. I never tried to take your place. I just saw a boy who was falling apart and no one was there to catch him." David looked away, jaw tight. "Maybe I should have been the one to help him, not you," she whispered. "Then why didn't you?" He had no answer. He just left the room. That night, Emily cried quietly in bed. The house that had finally begun to feel like a home now felt like a battlefield. She wasn't angry at David. She understood his fear. But it broke her heart that kindness could be mistaken for something else. Over the next week, David withdrew completely. He stopped joining them for meals, stopped asking questions. Ryan noticed the change, but didn't know why. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked one afternoon. "No, Ryan," Emily said gently. "You didn't. Sometimes adults just misunderstand each other." He nodded slowly, but his expression carried guilt. "I don't want to cause problems." "You're not," she said firmly. "You're just being honest. Don't blame yourself." But deep down, Emily knew their family was splitting. The bond she had worked so hard to build was now creating cracks in her marriage. She couldn't undo what had been said. And she didn't know how to make David see her intentions were pure. One evening, while she was cleaning the porch, Ryan walked up to her with quiet eyes. "I heard you and Dad last night," he said softly. "You were fighting because of me." She froze, setting down the broom. "Ryan, listen, I'm sorry," he interrupted. "You didn't have to defend me. I should have just kept to myself." Emily stepped closer, her tone tender. "No, don't say that. You did nothing wrong. I care about you, and I'm proud of how much you've grown. That's not something to be sorry for." He looked down, his voice trembling. "It just feels like everything I touch falls apart." Her eyes filled with tears. "Ryan, you are not the problem. You're the reason this family still has a chance." There was a long silence before he nodded slightly. "Thanks, Emily." But as she watched him walk away, her heart ached. She knew they couldn't go on like this forever. Something had to give. Either David's misunderstanding had to end, or their fragile family bond would break completely. That night, Emily stood at the kitchen window, staring at the reflection of her home in the dark glass. It looked peaceful from the outside. Lights warm, walls strong, but inside, the love that once connected them was beginning to splinter. She whispered to herself, "I just wanted to help." She didn't know that soon the truth would finally come out, and with it, everything would change again. The next morning began like any other. But the air inside the Parker home carried a heavy stillness. Emily moved through the kitchen quietly, her thoughts scattered. She hadn't slept much. Every word David said the night before echoed in her mind. She wondered if the love they had built over years could survive the doubt that now sat between them. Ryan came down for breakfast, his eyes puffy from lack of sleep. "Is Dad home?" he asked. She shook her head. "He left early. He didn't say where." Ryan nodded slowly. He picked at his toast, then looked up. "He's mad because you were helping me, isn't he?" Emily sighed. "He's confused." Sometimes when people love deeply, fear twists that love into something it shouldn't be. But he'll understand, Ryan. He just needs time. Ryan didn't respond, but his expression was filled with guilt. After breakfast, he quietly went to his room. Emily tried to focus on her work, but her hands trembled as she typed. She felt torn between two people she cared for, one who needed her guidance and one who needed reassurance that he wasn't being replaced. That afternoon, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke her thoughts. It was David. He walked in slowly, his face serious, but not angry. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the silence louder than words. "We need to talk," he said softly. Emily nodded and followed him into the living room. He sat down, hands clasped tightly. "I've been thinking," he began. "And I realized I've been unfair. I saw things I didn't understand and assumed the worst. That's on me." Emily's eyes softened. "David, I never wanted to make you feel left out. Ryan just needed someone to listen." "I know," he said quietly. "I spoke to him this morning before coming home." Her heart skipped. "You did?" He nodded. "I went to the park. He was there, sketching. I didn't plan to talk, but I saw one of his drawings. It was of us, our family. You, me, and him. He wrote a small note under it. The first time I felt like I belonged." Emily's throat tightened. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. David continued, his voice low. "He told me how you helped him, how you listened when I didn't, how you made this house feel safe for him. I've been blind, Emily. I was so busy trying to be a good father that I forgot being present matters more than providing." Emily placed a hand over his. "You're not a bad father, David. You just didn't see how much he was hurting. But now you do." He exhaled slowly, relief and regret blending in his expression. "I don't want to lose either of you, you and Ryan. You've given me something I didn't realize we needed, a real family." Before she could respond, Ryan appeared in the doorway. He'd probably heard everything, stood there holding his sketchbook close to his chest. "Dad," he said softly, "I'm sorry. I never wanted to come between you two." David got up and walked over. "You didn't, son. You reminded me what family is supposed to mean." He pulled Ryan into a hug. It was awkward at first, the kind of embrace that happens when years of distance melt into one small moment of truth. But soon, it became real. Emily smiled through her tears. For the first time in months, the tension lifted. The silence that had filled their home was replaced by something warmer: forgiveness. Later that evening, they sat together for dinner. It wasn't perfect. A few pauses, some quiet moments, but there was laughter again. David asked Ryan about his art. Ryan showed them new sketches, and Emily noticed the sparkle returning to his eyes. After dinner, as Ryan went upstairs, David turned to her. "You really changed him," he said softly. Emily smiled gently. "No, he changed himself. Just helped him see what was already there." David looked at her for a long moment, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry I doubted you." "You don't have to be," she replied. "We were both trying to protect something we love." He reached for her hand. "Let's promise something. No more silence. No more fear. Something feels wrong, we talk about it." She nodded. "Deal." In that quiet moment, surrounded by the soft hum of their home, Emily felt peace return. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was real, fragile, and human. Weeks passed and things slowly got better. Ryan applied for art school and got accepted into a summer program out of state. When he received the letter, he ran downstairs, waving it with joy. "I got in." Emily and David hugged him, both proud and emotional. "You earned it," Emily said, smiling. David added, "We'll help you with everything you need, son." That night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily reflected on everything that had happened. Life had thrown them challenges that could have broken them apart, but instead it brought them closer. Love, she realized, wasn't about perfection. It was about staying when things got hard, about choosing to believe in one another when doubt tried to destroy what was real. Ryan came out to join them, sitting between them quietly. "You know," he said after a while, "I think things happen for a reason. If we hadn't gone through all that, maybe we wouldn't be like this now." Emily smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Maybe you're right." David chuckled softly. "You sound like your stepmom now, always finding meaning in everything." Ryan grinned. "Guess I learned from the best." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the three of them sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, grateful, healed, and finally at peace. Emily leaned her head on David's shoulder, whispering, "We made it through." He squeezed her hand. "Yeah, together." That night, when Emily looked around their home, she didn't see walls filled with tension anymore. She saw memories, laughter, and love. She saw a family that had stumbled but found its way back. And though the journey had started with misunderstanding and pain, it ended with something far greater: forgiveness, growth, and a bond strong enough to carry them forward. In the end, the story wasn't about mistakes or suspicion. It was about second chances and how sometimes love finds its way back when you least expect it. And that, Emily thought, as she turned off the lights and whispered goodnight, was something worth believing in.